I drive a cab, and my time is the graveyard shift, which most drivers hate. Too many drunks, and they figure not enough in the way of fares. They're right about the drunks, but wrong about the fares. I live in Canada, in a mid-sized town out west. We have winter 9 months of the year, and the downtown empties out at the end of the business day. But after midnight, the whole city comes into existence. It appears a substantial part of the population, say 5%, sleeps all day and parties all night. As a result, I'm pretty much on the hop from around midnight to 4 a.m, taking these party animals wherever they want to go. I draw no moral judgments. Most of my passengers are high on something, but I'm a pretty big dude with a shaved head, so no one has ever tried to get rough with me or rob me. I see the odd pedestrian while I'm cruising around, usually during the warmer months, but the night people prefer a cab. I'm faster than walking, and it makes them less likely to attract the attention of the local constabulary, which is why the woman stood out. I first saw her along 13th. Now isn't that appropriate? It was late April 30th to be exact, which is certainly the cruelest month around here. We were experiencing a light snow shower. Yeah, a snow shower. At the moment I first laid my eyes on her, it was around midnight. Due to both the time and the weather conditions, she was the only one on the street, but I would have noticed her even in the midst of a crowd. She was very tall, with a round, pale, lovely face, with classic aquiline features. Her eyes were very dark, black, while the hair I could see under her hood was golden honey blonde. She was well dressed in an expensive fur coat, too expensive for this area, hell for this city, and black boots which went up to her knees. I wondered who she was and where she might be going at midnight. Was she going home? Or was she going to meet a lover? I wasn't on the way to a call, so I drove ahead a few blocks, then turned and double-backed. But she was gone. No doubt she had turned onto one of the side streets. I wondered why I had turned the cab around to gawk. Yeah, she was attractive, but it was strange. I just felt drawn to her. I hadn't even made eye contact with her or anything. In fact, she was just staring straight ahead. But then dispatch sent me to run to the inner city, and I got busy and forgot all about it. And yet, as the weeks and months of this most peculiar year of 2020 went along, I saw the mystery woman more and more. Always late at night, always alone, and always walking along an empty street with no other pedestrians, and always a little closer to me every time I noticed her. The fewer people around might explain why I saw her and noticed her so often. Yeah, it might explain it. Might. But I also noticed that the weather always took a turn for the worse whenever I saw her, either before or directly after. One night as I drove through the canyons of downtown, I could see vivid flashes of lightning arcing through the darkness overhead. An electrical storm was coming, a bad one too, and I pulled into a parking garage to get out of the downpour. I found a spot at ground level and parked where I could see the street, and heard a clap of thunder so loud it actually shook the multi-level structure. And then the rain came down. I rolled down my window to listen to the symphony of precipitation when I caught sight of something out of the corner of my eye. It was the mystery woman. She was dressed very appropriately in a long black gunslinger's raincoat. Had she come here to get out of the rain? Or was she here for some other purpose? I called over to her with the idea of asking if she needed a ride. Hello? But she ignored me. Either that, or she didn't hear me over the cacophony of the storm. I stepped out of the cab, but in the instant I wasn't looking at her directly. She disappeared. I took a quick turn and looked around the darkened garage, but I couldn't see her. Surely she didn't walk out into all the rain. I got back in the car, She was in the back seat. After I got over my astonishment, I spluttered, "Can I take you someplace?" She said something that I didn't quite catch, so I finally fully looked around and looked into the back seat, but she was no longer there. My eyes swept the garage in case she had returned to her previous position near the front, gazing out at the Raynham Road, and then I too was looking out at the dark rain, falling, 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 and then I too was falling into darkness. It had stopped raining by the time I returned to full consciousness. The time on the dashboard read 4:14 a.m. I had to have been asleep for at least 2 to 3 hours. And then I remembered the woman. What had happened to her? Where had she gone? I pulled the car in gear and left the garage, but I only went a block before I made myself pull over. I was as weak as a kitten and afraid I was going to pass out. I rolled down the window to breathe in some of that good, clean, fresh air which only comes after a storm, hoping it might revive me. I heard dispatch calling my cab number and wondered if they'd been trying to contact me and for how long. I picked up and said, "I'm going to have to book off now. I've been fighting a migraine for hours and need to go home." I told them I would be back tomorrow and went home and slept for 12 hours straight. When I finally awoke, I was feeling pale and completely washed out. My throat hurt, and it seemed red and inflamed like I had a rash. A mystery woman only seen at night? A sore red throat? No. Stuff like this doesn't happen. It doesn't exist in the real world of a cab driver. That night, my first call took me to the warehouse district to drop off a passenger who had a condo in an abandoned factory building. I always wanted to live in a place like that. Yeah, I know. After I dropped the passenger off, I should have gone to one of the big nearby parking lots and waited for my next call. But I was restless, so I went cruising the side streets of the warehouse district. I liked the old buildings, the old brick factories. A fairly thick fog began to roll in, adding to the atmosphere. And then through the glistening mist did I see her again. Tonight she had a goth look, black hoodie, black pants, black boots, but I could still make out her pale white skin, which seemed to glow in the gathering gloom. Once again, she was totally alone. She turned at once to cross the street, and after a moment I put the car in gear and crept slowly forwards, planning to follow at a discreet distance. But when I turned the next block, she had vanished into the fog. Gone. I pulled over to the curb, no sense in wasting gas, and then she was there right next to me, by my driver's side window. She was looking at me and staring at me, with this arch smile on her face. I rolled my window down and said, "Who are you?" And all she did was shake her head slowly at first, back and forth with increasing vigor, while I wondered just what the hell she was up to. And then I heard a plop. Her head detached from her body, and just hung there outside my window grinning at me. Her blonde head was floating in mid-air. I didn't stick around to see what was going to happen next. In spite of the fog, I drove like a madman, just wanting to get away, far away. But eventually I was stopped by a red light, and she was right there. Or at least, her head was, hovering just outside my window, staring in at me with eyes which gave off a faintly reddish glow, and at the same time, the arch smile. I ran the red light, trying to get away, but her head just hung there, outside my window no matter how fast I drove. But eventually, I lost her in the downtown, where there were more lights and more visibility. And I've been working day shift ever since. I've gone online, even visited the public library, trying to find out what she is, what sort of being. So far, I haven't seen her in daylight. I guess she only comes out to play at night. That said, I have seen her again. Maybe. I was online and saw a picture of her, or someone who looks exactly like her. Elizabeth Bathory, the blood countess of the Middle Ages, the evil witch or vampire who used to bathe in human blood. Never heard of her? Well, Google it. You're in for some interesting reading. It couldn't be her, though. It couldn't. Things like that aren't possible. But still, my mystery woman appears to be the identical twin of her. In fact, a dead ringer. So Elizabeth, or whoever you are, in future, let's just not meet.